So now we have our cube 3D object actually engulfing the front part of the schematic. Now if we rotate around, turn on polyframe, see this cube 3D object still has these poles in the center of it, so we need to get rid of those. To do that quick, we're just going to DynaMesh this actual object. So the first thing we need to do is turn it into a polymesh. So I'm just going to have that selected, make polymesh 3D, and then I'm going to come down to the DynaMesh tab, turn blur to 0, and then set my resolution probably to around 256, and then hit DynaMesh. And so you can see now we have the cube 3D object is now a DynaMeshed object. So the topology is consistent across the entire surface. Now going back to the back view of the schematic, so you can actually see the schematic in front of the cube, we need to cut off this top section here and cut off this bottom. Now using the slice curve is one method of doing this. So if you hold Control and Shift and come up here and select slice curve, you can then come and just quickly, dragging the slice curve out while holding Shift will give you the slice curve on angles or straight. And then using spacebar after you've drawn it out, you can kind of align it to where you're going to go and then kind of apply it. And what that's going to do, it's going to give you another polygroup wherever you put that slice curve at. So you could take that slice curve and generate polygroups, hide those polygroups and re-DynaMesh, and that would give you one method of kind of cropping the actual box to fit the shape of the schematic. Another method I like to do is actually to come down to the actual deformation tab and then just go to the flatten right here. So normally, at least with this schematic, X will go horizontally, Y will go up and down, and Z goes front to back. So I'm just going to make sure I have Y selected, and then I'm just going to literally slide this slider. And you can see as I slide it, it's just going to smush the actual geometry down. So I just slide the top to match that, and then slide the other one to match the bottom. So another quick way of kind of deforming the geometry that I find a little bit faster on items like this than actually using the slice curve. And then once you have this, since it was just flattening the object, you need to re-DynaMesh again, so just Control off and drag, and now we have our box all flattened and fitting the vertical aspects of the actual schematic. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to think about the negative shapes that make up the actual cuts in this object. So this first shape here looks like we can have a cylinder that would cut this shape out, and then a box that would fill this, and then another box would fill this. And then we have a second box that would come down and make this kind of shape here and cut that out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on this shape right through here. So we're going to actually just come up here, and we're just going to append a cylinder object. It's just appending a cylinder 3D object. I'm going to select that object and turn on transparency so I can see it in relation to the actual cube object and still see the schematic in the background. Coming back down to the deformation tab, I'm just going to take this size slider and just scale it down. You can use the transform tools here too. Sometimes I use both. It just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. And then I'm just going to go and make sure I have move selected, hold Alt, and kind of position it to that area over there. And if it's too large, I can just kind of scale it down some and then just position it back. So I want to kind of mimic that negative curve that's actually coming out of this shape here. So that's our first object. Our next one we need to do is just another square. So I'm just going to come up here and append another cube 3D object. Select that object and do the same thing. So I'm just going to come back down to size, scale that down, holding Alt, just moving it into position and just getting it to line up with this bottom part and with this angle right here. Now as you notice, it's kind of exceeding the actual angle here, so I'm just now going to go to that flatten again. This time I'm going to use X, which should be the vertical, or actually Y is the vertical axis. And then I'm just going to do that, find which one it is, and just kind of scale it down until it roughly collides with that. So you can see now I have that kind of lined up. So right now I have this cylinder shape, which is covering this curve here, and then the square shape, which is covering this side and this side. And so now I need another square shape to make this cut right here. So I'm just going to duplicate this square that I just made. So going back up to the subtool palette, I'm going to hit duplicate, and then using the rotate transpose tools, I'm just going to click on the box, and I'm actually going to click and hold Shift and drag up. And this was another way just to kind of get a straight transpose line. And then I'm just going to hold this top one here, the inner circle, and just rotate it. Now I'm going to switch to move, hold Alt, and kind of position it to where a little bit close it needs to be. It still needs to rotate a little bit more. So I'm just going to rotate it some more, going back to rotate, trying to match that angle exactly, and then using move again with Alt to kind of position it where it needs to go. So now I have all three of those objects, which will help me create this negative shape. Now if I isolate these, I'm going to turn off floor quick and transparency. You can see that this box is obviously, you know, the cylinder is not visible with the box, and I have a little bit of a random overlap here with these two objects here. So I just need to kind of clean that up. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on transparency and see my cylinder and see where it's actually at. And I need to grow this shape so it's actually wider than the box here. So coming back down here to the actual deformation panel, I'm going to go to the actual size. I'm going to just isolate by Z, and then just increase the size here. So I'm just going to get it so it extends out of that actual box, so I kind of see it from this angle. Now this box, I kind of want it to get it lined up so it's directly hitting the curves here. So I'm just going to use the move option again, holding Alt, and just kind of position the box so both those parts literally just touch the bottoms of the cylinders, because I want this shape to be pretty much a clean cut, or as clean as it can be. So something like that. I'll actually move this a little bit more, so we have a little bit of it kind of hanging out. And then we're going to fix this one here as well, so it literally bumps right up against that other one. So just taking the move transpose tool again, and then just holding Alt and just moving it in position so it lines up. And there we go. So this is clean, this lines up with the sphere, but now I have the issue where I need this cut to be made and not this square cut. So I'm going to come back to this box here, and I'm just going to quickly DynaMesh this. So I'm going to set the resolution to say 256, blur to 0, and DynaMesh. Now if you noticed it's not, you know, giving you enough resolution on that thing, you can just redo it again. Make sure you have your blur set. It looks like it didn't quite register on that. I have to go to 512. There we go. And now I'm just going to select the draw tool, come up here and do select rectangle, and then just drag a rectangle into the center of these objects. So kind of like that. And what that's going to do, it's going to remove that kind of piece of geometry from that square. So now you can see I'm getting that curved shape around that cylinder. So if I solo it, you can see it's now just kind of carved out of the actual object. But if I do a delete hidden now and then re-DynaMesh, it'll fill that hole in and still have enough surface exposed to let that cylinder kind of go through. So there's basically my subtractive object to make that carve into the actual main shape to get the rail. So now I'm just going to come through. I have this piece already DynaMeshed, so I'm just going to move it up and then make sure both of these are on positive, and then just do a merge down and another merge down. So now I have one solid object to correspond here. Now one thing you notice that before I merge this down, I probably need to just subdivided this cylinder a little bit more, so it has a little bit of tessellation here. But so we're going to try to subdivide it now and get some of that tessellation out of it. And so now we have this edge being clean, this edge being clean, and this edge being semi-clean. And I'm actually going to clean this up a little bit, just using the actual smooth brush really quick, and just kind of smoothing this out just to get that line a little bit cleaner. And this is preference here. Depending on the size, the actual rails are actually pretty small, so you never really see any issues in that area. And so there's my subtractive shape. Now if I go back to my main shape, you can see the subtractive shape is a little bit small compared to the main shape. So we're again going to do that scale again. So we're going to come down here to the deformation panel, go to size, and just put on Z, and then scale so that we scale out beyond the limits of the actual box. So here we have our shape in relation to the schematic again. You can see it matches pretty much identical to the other side. Now, doing this DynaMesh subtraction stuff, I'm wanting to carve this shape out of this side, but also out of the other side. One thing nice about this method, instead of using the clip brushes, is that I can save this tool out as something else or do whatever I want to it to kind of make sure that it stays the same across the object. So if I take this object here and then do a simple mirror and weld, I now have two of the objects, and they're exactly the same. They're exactly mirrored down the middle of this object, and when I do the cuts, they're going to match perfectly. With the clip brushes, I could clip one side, but it's not going to clip on the other side, so you'd have to make one clip and then kind of try to match the second clip on the other side. So with DynaMesh Sub now, you can just mirror your geometry as much as you want, and then do the subtraction process. So we're going to do the subtraction now for this. I just have my cube selected, turn on the subtract option on the second subtool, do a merge down, hit OK, and then re-DynaMesh. And so now you can see we have the rail is starting to take place, or starting to take shape. So we've got those carved elements kind of subtracted out of it now. So now if we go back to our schematics, so just turn the floor plan back on, you can see we have a few more carved cuts to make. We need to cut this part off here, and there's this tiny square right here that we can cut off as well. And then we may get around to do a little bevel work with this stuff. So first off, we're just going to hit a pen, and we're just going to bring in another Cube 3D object, select that, and this time we're just going to move it. We're not going to scale it at all, and then we're just going to rotate this to kind of match the angle on the schematic. Now luckily these schematics are actually pretty good, so you can actually match this pretty exactly. Then once we have it where we're at, we're going to turn off the floor here just to make sure. We want to make sure this object, once again, goes over the actual extents of the actual main shape when it does its cut. So come back down to the size, select Z, and then just scale it up so it overshoots the entire object. Now another nice thing about, since this object is symmetrical, is that I could just DynaMesh this one side here. So if I come here, put this on subtract, select the top, do a merge down, and re-DynaMesh. You can see I have one side done, but the other side isn't done. Since this is a DynaMesh mesh, I can still use any of the other mirror and weld options, kind of like we did for this subtractive piece here. So I can just come here and hit mirror and weld, and now I have both sides identical. It works really great for symmetrical objects, but if you don't have the luxury of having a symmetrical object, you could just mirror and weld the subtractive pieces and then position them where you need to go.